Okay, rolling right along. We're just going to keep on going. We're doing the 1910 decade at the Hats of the 20th Century Museum. And I'm up to the part where I would talk about berets. At this time, they loved having big, generous berets, much like was worn in the Tudor period by Henry VIII, I believe. Oh, can't remember what I used to think. But they usually had a tuft on the side and some ornamentation, and they were very, very stylish. A beret had been popular. Make sure I got it on right. Oh, I do. Berets have been popular since the early Renaissance period, so they have been around for a long, long time. And when they were black, this is a lovely brown velvet. Did I show you the lining? See? The gathered in the center lining with a flat piece at the top. There we go. I should try to show you linings a little more. I couldn't really do that when I did a show for an audience because they were too far away to see it. Now here's one that has a little golden print in the inside of the lining. So when a beret was black and velvet and plumed, they were often called a Rembrandt, much like had been worn by the Dutch painter. So they were very stylish too. I feel lucky. These are the only two berets I have ever seen in the way of being an antique. Okay, berets weren't the only thing. They also liked to have the turban look. The turban look was very, very popular. So let's take her beret off right away. And we'll go with the turban look, gathered in the center lining. And of course, you don't really wrap your head with fabric every time you go out. You wrap the foundation of a hat, which is wire and buckram. I can feel the wire and hear the buckram. So you make the foundation and then you wrap it to look like a turban. And that was very stylish at this time. And she looks lovely in it. A couple of velvet ties at the end of the ornamentation that kind of makes you think of feathers, in fact. Here's another one that I think you could technically call a turban. And maybe it's time to get rid of this big hat. Very gently put it aside, okay? Because it's just so wrapped and flowing, and at least I'm going to say it's turbanish. And on the inside, it really does show, this one really opened up the gathered in the center to show the name of the company that made it on a flat piece. There we go. And is this the one? Oh yes, this is Yonkers Brothers Incorporated. Paris, New York, and Des Moines. Now, I always got a kick out of that. You know, the fashion triad of the universe. Paris, New York, and Des Moines. I know that Paris and New York were always waiting to hear what Des Moines had to say about the situation. But isn't it lovely? All those little original flowers, it's just in such awfully nice shape. A cute, very dainty turban. Set you aside here. Okay, so now where are we at? Turbans. Oh, let's do this one then. Here we go. We're going to come down here. Yeah, let's come all the way down here. And we'll talk about this hat here, which is called a lingerie hat. And always popular for weddings and garden parties. Very dainty, summer-looking, beautiful hat. And honestly, that one is something that I had to remake. It was in such horrible condition that honestly, the owner of the shop just gave it to me. She said, this is hopeless, and she was about to throw it away. I kept some of the parts from what I took off. This is the only parts that survived in any entirety. It was just in terrible condition. But I remade it as best I could, and I remade it using the fabric that I got that had been wadded up. Now some of the other stuff I added the old flowers and the old pearls, but the rest of it had been wadded up inside a pair of shoes at the antique store. So that was a wonderful find, my goodness. And in the note of the shoes, oh, there's still some fabric down in there. I'm moving this around so much you can't even see what I'm doing. But also in the toe of the old shoes, the sweet old shoes, is a note, and I've put it in plastic now. My 1916, my wedding slippers. So you would assume the fabric might have had something to do with their wedding too. Isn't that sweet? But all right, back to, and that's the way shoes would have looked in 1916 too. That was such a find. And back to the hat that she was about to throw away. She gave it to me. She didn't even want paid for it. It was so bad. And she also gave me another frame. She said, this one's really gone. But you see, to me, this is just wonderful to see what the women of 100 years ago were able to buy. Because, you know, they liked making their own millinery. And, you know, the mothers fussed over their daughters' weddings just like they do today. Let's look at this one. That's worth better looking than this. But, so this was just a treasure to me to get to have a piece of original millinery supplies like this. So the mothers might have made, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 of these for the bridesmaids. And then a tiny little one for the flower girl. Who knows? It was something that they always loved, just as we do today. Now, since the 1890s, we've been in a period known as Art Nouveau, which means flowing lines, very feminine, characterized by things from nature, soft and willowy, much like this hat. And actually even the little flowers on that turban there would be sort of Art Nouveau in my mind. But in these teen years, we began to have an appreciation for the geometric. So I'm just going to leave this on her head because of her wild orange lipstick. A hat that was meant to set squarely on your head would shoot off at its own rakish angle. Very geometric. And this love of the geometrics swept the world of art and design by the 1920s and eventually became known as Art Deco. But the geometric appreciation began in the teen period. So I'm going to show you the inside. Here we go. It's a Gage hat. Now anybody that buys hats knows that Gage is a company that's around through the decades. Just fantastic. Gathered in the center lining. Oh, it's got a little bow at the back of the, where the gathered part opens up. A little bow. I'll tell you about that later. Remind me. Okay, I'm going to take my hat, my turban beret off. Here's another hat. Very geometric. Old gathered in the center lining. Meant to set squarely on your head, and it shoots off at its own angle. Very geometric. See? And I love this plume has been somehow bound together at the edges of the plume. Isn't that something? But there we go. There's our geometrics for you. The Art Deco. Okay, so something else that's happening is that a hat called a toque is beginning to emerge. And a toque is essentially a crown with a tiny little rolled brim. So this is really just a perfect example. There we are with a more fitted lining again. I'm going to put this one on me. There we go. So a toque is a brimless hat. Here's another one. And surprise! As we get closer to the 20s, we're starting to have colored linings. So isn't that marvelous? But it's gathered in the center, open to a flat piece. This is another nearly perfect toque. A hat that is brimless except for the tiniest little rolled brim. And it's folded in a kind of an artistic, geometric points. And are you getting the whole hat like up here where the point is and everything? Yeah. There we go. That's definitely close enough. Be sure you get the long view of her too. So here we are, a new style called a toque. Although actually, it's an old style because this is a type of hat that they wore in 16th century France. So a toque has been around for centuries. And being a little more inclusive by now, any hat without a brim was called a toque. So that big birthday cake, I wonder where I set that, over here? Yeah. This was also called a toque in the catalogs and magazines. No brim, just a crown. So it was a toque. Okay, so, that one, oh, I could have left it on, but you know why. It's old and I don't need to wear it. Okay, let's do this one. Here we go for geometric. Here is a beauty. Found that one in a furniture department of an old antique store laying on a sofa. Isn't that marvelous? An elliptical brim, sheer, just gorgeous. Look for the day. The flowers are getting a little more geometric and artistic, being something that's made of fabric, not real floral things. And you can see that it had faded terribly, so it must have been quite bright at one time, getting very brittle. And I want you to see her lining. A fitted lining, but it is such a pretty fluorescent, iridescent satin. So we're getting prettier linings as we get closer to the 1920s. She's a beauty, so be sure you get down and get her, so I don't have to do her over again. Get her look. Get low if you can. There we go, right straight on her, and I'll give her a turn. She's pretty exceptional. There we go. All right, got it. Now, so men's hats. You might wonder why this hat, knowing that the bow is always in the back of a man's hat, always at the back of the sweatband in a man's hat. You might wonder why the back is hanging and the front is sticking up. But they had a little fun with that style as you got to the 20s. That seemed to be the way the men want to wear their hats, at least some of them. And with no flowers, feathers, and stuff to fool around with, this was about all a man could do, was change the shape of his brim. So why is there a cute little bow in the back of men's hats? Well, it says that the story is that it's a survival of the first tied-off ribbon on berets, which were worn typically by men. A beret is a round circle of fabric with a string or ribbon around the outside. You gather that up to the correct head size and tie it off. And that little tie has become an ornamental survival of a man's hat. That's why I pointed out this, one of the ladies' hats had it too. Because right in this time period, I am seeing that we have some ladies' hats that have little ornamental survivals. But they're at the top of the lining where the gathered in the center would have opened up to the flat piece. So there's one in this hat. Clearly an old hat. It's got a white lining. It's by a company called Stonehill. A Stonehill hat from Chicago, London, or Paris. And I bought this little summer beauty at an auction where the dear little elderly lady said that she had loved this hat when she was a teenager, a young girl. This was what she wore to the beach. So would I enjoy it? Well, I enjoyed it, and I love it dearly. And it's another one that was so horrible, so dirty, but you know, with some steam and brush and a little shoe polish, you can really bring them back to what they had been. So anyway, that's a beautiful old hat with a lady's bow. Let's see if this has. Yep, this is another one that has a lady's bow. Here at the back, it's black, so it's a little hard to see, but there she is. And this is a hat that, I don't know, it's got plenty of feathers, a couple of rosettes on the side. Didn't seem to be much, but then it wasn't very expensive. So, and I was surprised that it's quite stylish when you put it on. What a deal. Maybe I'll turn around so you can see the back too. Very typical of what an older lady might be wearing at this time. Now here's another one that the shape looks just about exactly the same. Lots of feathers, or lots of fluff in the feather. Little business with threads and whatever to decorate the front and the back. very nice satiny lining that just is like brand new, because it is brand new. I bought this hat because of this little square inch of paper that says $1.75. So it had never been used, never been worn. It's an example of what they call new old, something that is antique but never worn. So no wonder it's in beautiful condition. That is just a treat. Oops, you know, that's way too big for her. We probably don't really need to take the time to put it on her, but she's just going to go back in the tub. So I stick those little puffs I've made to give them a little more hair. There we go. That means we're 15 minutes. Oh, jeez. You know what? We're going to go longer because we have to. All right. I want to get to the part, because we're just 3 or 4 hats from the end. Here we are. This is a lady's fur hat, not beaver fur probably, just a felt fur, or a wool felt fur, made from the Fisk Hat Company, who had made ladies' hats since 1853. It always said that on the top of their boxes. This one even has the date in it, 1907. So I'm hoping that the suffragette who probably bought this, because it is so austere, it looks like something a very serious woman would be wearing on a march for voting rights. She maybe bought it and has worn it for years by this time period, because they're getting to the end of their battle for voting rights. Here's one that is a beautiful gathered in the center lining, some very tired old flowers, but a beautiful Z-back design. I don't think I'd probably be the best one to model it, but Sis is right here, so we'll give it to her. So I can't help but think the suffragette maybe chose something like this for her summer marches. Isn't that a stylish hat? I mean, it's really nothing special, but just so stylish. So these gals were in the end of their long struggle for voting rights that had been started by these two. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony had begun the fight for women's votes in 1848. So this is a long battle they're about to win. These gals will both have passed away and not see it, but by 1920 they do get the rights for women. Now, there was another struggle going at this time, and it was a big one. The war to end all wars, they had hoped, World War I. And my grandfather was there to see it. Here's a picture of him. Put the hat down and hold it. Grandpa was a doughboy. Oh, holding it wrong. Just tell me I'm holding it wrong. There you go. Anyway, it's a soldier. A doughboy in World War I. So, I asked Grandpa, well, let's start with a little more information about the hat. This is a hat that is called a Montana Peak, and there had been all kinds of variations of it, but basically a Montana Peak. It had been used by ranchers and cowboys and cavalry scouts. But it had gotten adopted by the Army as their official hat in 1911. And for World War I, it became known as the campaign hat. So, my grandpa, as I said, was one of the doughboys that wore this hat and went to war. And I wondered, why were they called doughboys? So I tried to figure that one out. And there are so many ridiculous reasons that I feel like no one even knows. I should have asked Grandpa. If I could just talk to him again, he would surely know. But they've got all kinds of ideas about the bread they cooked over a campfire out in the field. It didn't ever get quite done. That's why they're